Hi, I'm Matt with Schematical, and today we're going to be talking about poison data. How's it going, Dominic?
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. So, um, do you have a competitor or some malicious party crawling your website, stealing your data? Somebody you don't want to have that data. Maybe you could poison your data. And so, by poisoning your data, we mean altering little bits of it to make it look like it's your data, but slightly inaccurate. So, if they were to take your website and try and clone it, they would have pieces of it that are grossly inaccurate or slightly inaccurate, at least enough to defeat the purpose of them stealing it for your users. So, Dom, you've heard of this stuff before?
Yes. Now, would these listings, whatever they happen to be essentially hidden pages that you would have to have some sort of bot out there looking for that no user would ever find?
Yeah, you would take whatever you'd serve up to a normal user and somehow mutate it. So it could be an
Mhm,
individual page that way if you wanted to. You could take the same fields that you'd normally be serving up to your users and mutate them in some capacity so they're not,
mm.
they're not accurate. And so it doesn't have to be a full page, it could just be fields. But the tricky part is actually detecting if it's a malicious bot or not. That's going to be one of the
Mm.
hardest parts.
Well, I guess you could either have hidden pages or you're saying the page would morph based upon who is looking at it.
That is correct. Yeah. So if you detected it was your competitor crawling your website to steal your content and repurpose it for their own, then you change parts of it to be inaccurate or otherwise contain
Well,
things.
or if you wanted to catch somebody red-handed copying something. Well, I suppose that's easy, right? You would just quite literally see the same thing there. Now, remember once that Elon Musk was trying to identify a leaker, and essentially by putting spaces and punctuation differences in every single email that went out, put a fingerprint on who that leaker was.
Right.
Similar but different.
You could absolutely do that. That
Hmm.
would at least let you know who was copying your work in some capacity, unless they're running it through an LLM or something like that. But you could watermark images, you could do a bunch of other
Hmm.
things that would at least let you know where it's showing up. Because I've had a lot of times where my clients, they're being, what's the word? It's where you steal somebody else's work without attribution. Starts with
Hmm.
a P, I think. Um, but they're stealing your work and they didn't attribute it. That's actually the gym I coached at.
Hmm.
That guy had his work stolen all the way across the country. People would just blatantly steal everything about it and think that he wouldn't notice, and ended up with a lot of it says copyright and trademark infringement lawsuits. So
Ah, there you go. There you go.
yeah,
So,
but
I
the
mean,
tricky part,
is this something? Is this something that you heard of people doing?
mhm, yeah, it's not completely uncommon in the practice. It just depends on you know what you want to reference you, or if you've got information that your competitors don't have and they're just blatantly stealing it and you found a way to detect them. Of course, you just feed them bad
Mm.
information at that point and have some fun with it. So because they're breaking your end user agreement, your terms and services, by stealing your data and reproducing it. Not like that's enforceable at all these days.
No, I mean that's the other part of it. So, I mean, this would be business intelligence level stuff. It's not going to be you or I copying a page. It's bots out there crawling like crazy.
Yeah, typically it'd be bots, that are going nuts, or somebody's automated a way to crawl your website and harvest your data without properly linking back to you or attributing to you. I mean, imagine I had an e-commerce site and I had all these blog posts I spent the time writing that, referenced various products I'm selling and all that info there,
Mm.
and somebody else just has something that goes and copies it, puts it on their website, and then claims it's theirs and doesn't link back to our website. Well, that's one way where we want to start messing with that. Another thing I see is because it's more common is lists of emails, phone numbers, things like that that maybe someone's acquired for mailing list purposes, and
Mm.
someone else is harvesting it there. So that was one example, and I I saw a web package that did this, just completely automated web package, and I refrained from referencing it because it wasn't renowned enough. I wasn't sure it was a
Mm.
legitimate
Well,
package, but it
how
seemed
how do you determine if something is a bot or is coming from your competitor? Because they're not going to do this from their website's IP address.
it depends on how sophisticated your competitor is. They
Mm,
just might. I'll be honest, they just
mm,
might. The amount of times I've gone back to an
mm,
IP and it's some box that's running a web server on it and it happens to be our competitors is
mm,
more than I'd like to admit. But it depends on how sophisticated the competitor is. It's possible the
mm,
competitor is not sophisticated at all and they just script kiddie the thing up and said
mhm,
go. But now with the rise of AI agents, it's getting a little more complex. But you could say that, if you detect that it's an AI agent host that's doing it. So I could, in some capacity, figure out if it's like an Amazon workspace running.
mm,
It's like, okay, well, this isn't Google, this isn't Meta, this isn't one of those that we kind of want to green light in some capacity. It's someone running an agent inside of a box, basically, a service that's designed for this, and then I'd have a good shot at it. But I mean, you could easily bypass it if you used APIFI as an MCP for your bot, because then you're
mm.
going to have a heck of a time tracking it through APIFI. That's their whole thing,
Sure.
is making it difficult. So,
Or just
just
even send a webhook through make.com or something like that.
you probably would detect that was make.com after a while. Make.com's not
Mm,
nearly as good at covering its tracks,
mm,
unless it was make.com using an APIFI or similar service integration there. But again, it depends on how complex the other ones. I mean, you could use captchas and things like that. I mean,
mm,
the other thing to do if you couldn't quite tell who was human or who wasn't is you'd obscure the data until they did some type of verification, sign up, validate an email, etc. And then we've got something at least, or fill out the captchas, which captchas are getting easier and easier to blast through right now.
mm,
So yeah, it's going to always be an arms race, going up and down. But every far too often it's some script kiddie that's just ripping you
mm,
off. And it depends on how much data you have too. If you've got a small amount of data that can easily, it's like just say your homepage updates with new numbers tracking this, that, or the other for the economy or
mm,
something every day, then you can, and one request from API, if I can pull that information down and store it, that's great. If you have millions of data points that are increasing or changing
mm,
rapidly, API might not be cost effective for you. It is actually fairly cost effective, but it can be prohibitive to crawl all that data all the time. So
mm. It's good for a cache. It's not for a constant crawler.
yeah, it's not at that volume. If it's updating, a million data points that update daily or something like that, that would be
Mm,
a heroic effort to try and crawl it. So you just got to keep in mind how valuable is that data to competitors, to the baddies, to whoever.
mm,
So yeah, it's interesting the amount of resources that people have, but if they don't have a financial motivation. But if they do have a financial motivation, they'll figure out a way to do it. If they don't have a financial motivation or the reward's not big enough, they oftentimes will use just a little bit of security blocking, poisoning, whatever will throw them off. Poison it,
mm.
they don't even know most of the time.
This is just a how long until somebody uses this and actually rickrolls somebody?
Rickroll somebody. That would be. I'm sure it's happened before. I can imagine all sorts of fun Rickrolls happening. In a cross-site scripting attack that just redirects you
Hmm.
to a Rickroll would not be difficult to pull on a lot of websites.
Nope, I don't think so.
Yeah. So with that
Well,
said, you
that's
talked
that
about
technology.
yeah. So it's just one tool you can have in your repertoire to combat malicious traffic. We've talked about WAF before. Shameless plug. If you're not familiar with WAF, Web Application Firewall, check out my course, Zero to Hero, on an animated guide to security in the cloud. Do my O'Reilly's on-demand course there. So there's a lot of different ways you can try and defend against evil traffic, and blocking them is one way, but screwing with them is definitely another way. And then, like
Mm,
you said, gives you some fingerprints that they might allow you to verify that they're straight stealing our data. But again, you go to law enforcement agency, you'd probably be a civil suit at best. I guess if you had a client that had like a properly solid like contract with you, and then you found your data showing up on their site, like I could see this like if someone were to pay a research firm, for access to their
Mm,
reports, and then all of a sudden that same report or a variation thereof showed up on the website, and you probably ran it through an LLM. But if you change the stats that the LLM was told not to touch, like, okay, the stats are
mm.
accurate, then you could probably flush them out that way. So another way to potentially double check that. It's actually interesting right now. The distillation. You heard about model distillation?
No, do tell.
So So China is backward engineering U.S. models, is what I'm told. All right, I'm not a geopolitics guy, but what you can do if I wanted to backward engineer one of the Anthropic models is I'd feed in the requests, and then whatever it gave back to me, I'd use that as training data for a smaller, cheaper model. And so instead of having all the data that it's
Almost a
trained,
meta model.
it's a backward engineering of the models, and so
Mm.
it's actually
Of
not
course, you're going to lose
uncommon.
some amount of fidelity. You're going to get some amount of hallucination. You get some amount of drift.
If you turn the temperature down real low and you have very specific seeds, maybe not. Especially if you got
Mm,
control over the seed, you would save a lot of it. But it's actually a useful technique for training your own models, because then you kind of want to make sure that it works both forwards and backwards, and you can,
mm,
put in the same thing. You get a reliable response. Wouldn't want it for like, oh, be creative, but you'd want it for, hey, follow this task and do the same thing every
mm.
time. But then, of course, it also can be used maliciously. But in an international, like, there's not really international courts, so it's an interesting geopolitical situation that puts everybody in there. And I'm sure other countries are doing it, but China's just the one we know about as doing it on a massive scale. So
So
interesting.
essentially, like you said, they're distilling down the essence of the models into something smaller and lighter.
Yep, smaller and lighter, and they're it's kind of what I'm told is it's partially because of the chip war. They're being
Mm,
told they can't have their chips. We're like, okay, well, we're going to give away your models for free. Have fun,
mm,
suckers. And from what I hear, it is fairly effective.
mm.
I've seen people use. I don't want to name any of the names. Not that anybody's going to watch this and sue me, but I've heard some very tech savvy influencers, if you will,
Mm,
that rely on these models because they're a fraction of the cost of running like an Anthropic model, and they're
mm.
about 90 some percent as good. So, it's the question is, what is paying 10 times as much worth that extra 10%, you know? And so you have to figure that out
Well,
yourself.
or you know, paying the person that actually put the time and research and development into it to create revenue from it.
Hmm. Well, I guess to circle back, there's potentially a way that they try and prevent the distillation by
Mm,
feeding, like, so say I give Anthropic a prompt. That prompt doesn't go directly into the AI model. What they do is they
mm,
usually wrap it with some other stuff. They might change it or alter it in some way before it hits the
mm,
model, and then you get the response out. Well, if you don't know what that additional input is, then you don't know exactly what it takes to get that output that they're getting back.
mm.
So it's potentially
What's the
possible.
preprocessor doing in other parts of the pipe?
Yeah, and then what are they filtering out of the output?
Mm,
That might have been, they might put in something that, a copyright notice or something like that they
hmm.
filter out of that, or the fingerprint or whatever, and then so that way the people that are trying to backwards distill, there's a lot of gray area in there still, um,
You
that they
don't
can't.
you don't do the last filtration step on it. You let them fall face first into it.
Mhm. Yeah, and Anthropic definitely did that. They got caught when their source code leaked for their Claude code, that they were putting things in there that if you tried to use that model with other harnesses outside of Claude code, it
Mm,
wouldn't work as well. And I can vouch for that. Running with Hermes, it did not work well.
mm.
Claude's models, I think it was Sonnet something or other, with Hermes, not great, but I'd be willing to give it another try. So, yeah. Well, cool. I got to teach you about distillation today. I'm not
Cheers.
a perfect expert, but yeah. If with all this said, if you need help fending off, you know, AI attacks or bot swarms in this crazy world you're working on AWS, please feel free to give us a chat. We're also doing a lot of fun projects with AI right now, not just slapping LLMs and everything, but actually like very interesting two-tower model type trainings and stuff. So two-tower architecture. So if you're interested in all that stuff, you should either jump on the mailing list or feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Dom, you got anything else?
See y'all.
All right. Everybody have a great day.